Hey everyone, it's the Diplomat, and we are on part 32 of the Chris Watts Discovery Read-Through. In this part, we're going to cover an interview with Robert from Anadarko. We're also going to go through another interview with the Mistress and some text between her and Chris. This is after she turned over her phone. And then last, we're going to go through an interview with Josh, that's the husband of Cassie, and that is Shanann's friend. Okay, so beginning on page 688, we have a CBI report with Robert. This was another Anadarko employee. This occurred on August 23rd at 10:53 a.m. by Stacy Galbraith. CBI was requested to assist Frederick PD in a missing persons case, homicide. Robert was identified as an Anadarko employee who worked with and knew Chris Watts. Agent Galbraith interviewed Robert by phone on August 23rd. Action taken. Agent Galbraith interviewed Robert by phone on August 23rd at 10:53 hours. Robert met Chris Watts roughly 2 years ago through work at Anadarko. Chris was Robert's team's rover. Chris also did computer work in the office in the absence of IOC staff that worked on computers. Robert does not know what IOC stands for. They look at computers to determine things about well production. Chris would look at the computer and then have someone go check out a well if perhaps the production was down. Chris worked mostly in the field. He was always a rover and worked as an extra hand to employees, such as Robert, who had an assigned route. As a rover, Chris was not dedicated to a certain route. He would talk with the work group to see what help was needed where, and then work there. Chris was a field operator and would cover routes as relief to those that were off work or could not cover their own routes. Robert considered Chris a friend at work. They did not socialize outside of work. Sports was a big thing to Chris, and he is a Carolina Panther fan. Robert would talk about football with Chris. Chris did not really talk about anything personal at work. If Chris was gone from work, Robert and others would know that his kids were having a health issue, but that was really all Robert knew of Chris's family. Robert last saw Chris at work on August 10th. Chris acted as he usually does. Robert has since watched interviews Chris gave to the media prior to his arrest, and Robert felt that the Chris on the interviews was the Chris he knew at work. His demeanor and body movements were as Chris was the way Robert knew Chris. He demonstrated nothing out of the ordinary to Robert. Robert saw Chris every day at work in the mornings. The employees with assigned routes would then leave the office and go to work on their routes. Chris would get a task assigned or go back to work on something he was already working on. Robert saw no indications that Chris had any family problems. He never met Shanann or their children. Robert once talked to Shanann by phone for her to give him her spiel about Thrive. Robert has seen stories about how Chris had a happy family, and Robert would have guessed that Chris lived a normal, happy family life. I asked about Chris's ability to complete tasks and work. There were no indications that Chris was not of sound mind at work. Chris was very thorough and checked boxes to make sure he had what he needed to get a job done. Chris was a mechanic prior to working for Anadarko. Robert said that Chris did his job very well. Robert stated that it is trying to remember Chris as the guy that he worked with after this case. He was hesitant to provide his mailing address as he fears being bombarded with contact efforts to gain information. I assured him that his address would be in the law enforcement official report, which would be provided to Frederick PD and the DA's office, but not released to the media by CBI. I told him that in the event he would be needed as a witness to testify, he would be contacted in the future. He did provide his address. I thanked Robert for his time, and no attachments. Okay, going on to page 691, we have August 23rd CBI report, phone collection and interview with the Mistress by Kevin Kobach. We have Shanann listed as a victim, and the Mistress listed as witness 1, along with witness 2 listed as Charlotte. and Chris listed as suspect 1. So we have here property number 1 is an iPhone 6 Apple. This was the phone of the Mistress. Action taken. On August 23rd, 2018, I, Kevin Kobach, arranged to meet the Mistress at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation office in Lakewood. The Mistress and I had previously discussed her cellular telephone, which she used to converse with and text with Christopher Watts. The Mistress had previously consented to a search of her cellular telephone in Thornton, Colorado on August 16th. While at the Thornton PD, her cellular telephone was downloaded using the XRY software. As a backup and an effort to possibly recover more information, I requested that she allow the CBI to download her phone again using a different software too, Celebrate. The Mistress consented to another search of her phone and agreed to come to the CBI office and provide me her phone. The Mistress arranged to transfer her phone service to another phone which she had previously used. When she transferred her phone service from her current phone to her older phone, Samsung S5, multiple text messages which she had previously reported as deleted were recovered on her old phone. Attempts were made to download the Mistress's older telephone using Celebrate at the CBI. The phone was unable to be downloaded. The Mistress did send me text messages of the recovered texts between her and Christopher Watts. The recovered messages are from Watts' phone number. No messages were recovered between the Mistress and Watts' business Anadarko phone number. The recovered messages are as follows. On June 27th, Chris, promise, I'm about loyalty, truthfulness, and being dedicated. I don't like playing games, unless it's role-playing. Wink emoji. If you want me there, I will be there. Ice cream, cookies, and lollipops. Sounds like a cheap meal night. LOL. June 29th. I'm still going to see you. It won't be as often as we like, but I will make it happen. You think you're the only one addicted right now? I'm so hooked on you. June 29th as well. Sleeping without your warm body next to me isn't going to be fun tonight. On June 30th, the Mistress. I have an idea, by the way. I have a free hotel stay at the Holiday Inn. Not sure if you can swing it this month, but we can road trip to the mountains or southern Colorado for a day or two if you want. Won't cost a dime, LOL. Also the Mistress. She supports me, but her parents were in a situation like that when she was a kid and it came up. It won't bother me. I'm not going to stop seeing you. I made up my mind. Are we bad people? July 1st. Chris. I'd love to be part of it. Being in your life is something I crave. Conserve it while you can. I enjoyed our conversation tonight. I hope you have a great night. Sweet dreams. With a blowing kiss emoji. Then July 4th. Chris. I'm getting drenched right now, LOL. Like to see you all wet in the rain. My signal sucks so bad here. It might take a while to download your pictures. Crushed tacos and then it's cut off. And then Chris. I had a protein shake before I left. I thought there would be more here. I'm resisting the funnel cakes and tater twists, LOL. I'm in stopped traffic too. 112th. Lots of people here. Just pulled up to your place. The Mistress. You're so considerate. With some smiley face emojis. Chris. On July 17th. I hope it's 2:30. You need some rest, boo. July 26th. Chris. There it is. Yes, you deserve a pay increase for everything you're doing. Your plate is only getting fuller because people know what you can do. They need to compensate you now rather than later. August 10th. Chris. Rocky's game didn't end until 10:20. Good thing you left early. You would have been there a while. Then August 11th. Chris. Hope you had a great night, beautiful. Miss you. Get home safe. Sweet dreams, my sexy empanada. August 12th. The Mistress. No, you can't buy the scrolls, LOLs. Dude, the sea scrolls are some of the oldest, most important writing in the world. Chris. Nice. That sounds like a good time. I haven't seen an IMAX in a while. Sounds like you're having a fun day with the folks. I'm still at the B-Day party. Kids are soaked from the water balloons. And then a tongue sticking out emoji. Also August 12th, Chris. Been pounding fruit and had a whole jar of asparagus. He didn't smoke any BBQ this time. He did have hot dogs, so I did the fruit and veggies. And then a muscle emoji. Oh my God, that is absolutely ridiculous. They would freak out. That was Chris on that Monday, August 13th at 2:44 in the afternoon when he wrote that last part. So it looks like they had chunks based on, recovering some of those deleted ones and that they got screenshots from. I don't know if, there were certain things missing from these screenshots, but that was everything that was shown here. The mistress's phone was taken as evidence and booked into evidence at the CBI Lakewood. The evidence sheet is attached. The mistress continues to recall information from her relationship with Christopher Watts. On August 23rd, we discussed that information in a recorded interview room at the CBI Lakewood office. The recording is attached to this report. The mistress was introduced to CBI agents Tammy Lee and Stacy Galbraith prior to the interview. During the interview, CBI agent Matt Saylor assisted with data collection from her phone. During our interview at the CBI, the mistress provided the following information. The password is, and then it's redacted. She reported talking with her close friends about, in quotes, damage control, end quote, relating to her name getting out into the media. She asked them to remove photos of her on Facebook and other social media. She denied having any conversations with anyone about Chris, with the exception of her father and Charlotte. She admits to sending a photo of Chris to Charlotte during a text conversation on August 7th. During that same conversation, comments were made by the mistress that Chris had children. Charlotte has not made the connection that Chris is the person involved in this case. During this text conversation, the mistress says she can tell Watts has a lot to take care of. She says she is referring to him being a father, owning a home, and having children. She also says she can tell Watts is all about his kids. The mistress said at this time in their relationship, she was very positive about Watts and was enjoying their relationship. I questioned the mistress about mentioning the children and not liking that Watts has children. She said she was not sure he was the one she was going to spend her life with, and she did not like that he already had children, as Watts has already done everything in reference to marriage and children. She talked about having her own life with a man who has not been married and does not have kids. The mistress said this conversation was exclusive to her and Charlotte, and she never talked with Watts or anyone else about this information. Charlotte's father died on August 22nd, and Charlotte and the mistress had another conversation regarding Chris Watts. The mistress asked Charlotte to not speak with the media. She said they did not specifically discuss Watts or this case. When Chris returned from North Carolina in August 2018, he and the mistress spoke by phone. Chris told his mistress that Shanann was preparing to finalize their divorce and Shanann had called a realtor to find a new place to live. The mistress said she helped Chris look for an apartment for himself. She recalled finding an apartment in Brighton, Colorado that fit his needs, and Chris was, in quotes, gung-ho about the possibilities of the new apartment. On Saturday, August 11th, Chris and the mistress again discussed the apartment, and Chris did not seem interested. The mistress thought that Chris, in quotes, may have already known something I didn't, end quote. She said his mood had changed from their prior conversation about the apartment. The mistress further stated she and Chris discussed how he could cut costs when moving into a new apartment. The mistress said Chris is an avid football fan and loves to watch the games. She said he talked about cutting costs by getting rid of cable and using an Amazon Fire Stick. She said an unknown friend was working on this for Chris. She said after this conversation she felt like he was planning on leaving the house and moving into the apartment. The mistress talked about a phone conversation she had with Chris prior to him leaving for North Carolina. During the conversation, she said she tried to convince Chris to fix his relationship with Shanann. She said she tried to convince him to fix the relationship before pursuing her. The mistress said she wanted to know Chris had done what he could to repair his relationship prior to her coming into his life. The mistress said she felt it was, in quotes, fast. that Shanann called a realtor when she came home from North Carolina, as Chris reported she had done. She said Chris had initially dragged his feet about selling the house, and it surprised her that when they came home from North Carolina, she was immediately ready to sell the home. The mistress again discussed looking for apartments with Watts and recalled during their date on August 11th, 2018, Watts was reluctant to go look at apartments. The mistress said Watts had previously planned to look at apartments with her during the week of August 13th, and now he did not seem interested in doing so. Watts told his mistress he had found a few apartments, but none made him excited. She recalled one of the apartments Watts told her about was $1,200 a month and was 2 bedrooms, and she asked Chris the name, as she believed she would have seen it in her research, and he did not know the name of the apartments. The mistress recalled that Watts was, in quotes, unplugged during their Saturday, August 11th date. The mistress recalls 2 friends of Watts, Nick and Mark. She does not know their last names. The mistress and I discussed her employment, and she stated she was fired on August 22nd from Tasman Geosciences. She reported she was a contract employee with Anadarko through Tasman, and Anadarko had canceled her contract, so Tasman in turn fired her. The mistress provided me with a thumb drive which contained her cell phone call logs from July 14th to August 13th. She received the call log from her phone provider, Verizon, and provided me with a copy. See attached log for further. During the meeting with the mistress, CBI victim advocate Hazel Heckers spoke with her for a short period of time. After this conversation, the mistress inquired with me about how to change her name. I gave her cursory information on how to do so. She apologized for deleting the text messages and phone log between she and Watts. She admits to being very worried about the information being lost. I spoke with her about her deleting the messages and told her there are no criminal charges against her. I again spoke with the mistress about the text messages conversation she had with Charlotte. I specifically asked what she meant by his children making her uncomfortable. The mistress said she wants her own family. She said she never said anything to him about his wife or children being a problem. She never said to him his kids were an issue. She said she was thinking about building her own life and that he already had a life. She said she never said anything about kids damaging their relationship. She said there was never a conversation with Watts that he may have thought she was making reference to Shanann or his children being a problem. The mistress said she was 100% committed to Watts at this time, but was not sure if he was the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. The mistress said she cared about Watts and his children and always found the children, in quotes, cute. The mistress said Chris never mentioned getting rid of the kids and always discussed them moving with him when he got a new apartment. The mistress said this whole case has shocked her and said he lied so much, he lied to everyone, he had everybody fooled. The mistress went on to state she really believed that Shanann had left and believed that Shanann was just upset. She said when she goes back through everything, she did not see any red flags and she had no idea he was going to kill his family. She recalled thinking how long it would take for his brain to shift to get him to do this. She said he could have done this if she was in his life or not, and thought it could have been her or a coworker who could have been killed too. She said a lot of people will blame her and call her the catalyst. She said, in quotes, "It does not compute," end quote. Then stated how he can just say, in quotes, "Hey, my family just disappeared and I am not going to question that," end quote. She said Watts was so into his girls and she supported him being with his girls. The mistress said it made her happy when he was with his children. She said, in quotes, "I legitimately think his cheese was sliding off his cracker long before he met me," end quote. I inquired if the mistress had watched the relationship video posted on the media outlets. She said she had not, and said she does not like looking at Watts. The mistress provided no further information during this interview. Nothing further. Investigation continues. Then the attachments here are a phone waiver, I guess that maybe she had to sign. Then a Vigilon Control Center. I'm not sure what that was. Koback interview and Verizon phone records. Okay, next, beginning on page 700, we have a CBI Report interview of Josh. This is friends of Chris and Shanann. This is Cassie's husband. This was on August 24th at 8:47 a.m., also by Stacy Galbraith. Action taken. Agent Galbraith interviewed Josh by phone on August 24th at 8:47 a.m. Josh is married to Cassie, who was previously interviewed by phone by Agent Galbraith on August 15th. Cassie works at Lavelle with Thrive, as did Shanann Watts. That is how Cassie and Josh know the Watts. Josh met Chris in person for the first time in Las Vegas for Thrive in February 2018. Shanann, Cassie, Chris, and Josh had all communicated with one another prior to this trip to Vegas. When Josh met Chris in person, they hit it off and started talking. They shared similarities and had things in common. They developed a, in quotes, typical guy friendship. Cassie, Josh, and their children stayed at the Watts' house at the end of May 2018 as they were considering moving to Colorado and looking for houses and getting to know the area. The four then went on a trip to San Diego in June 2018 for Thrive. Josh described the relationship between Chris and Shanann as cohesive, normal, and stated they both showed affection for one another. Any moments of disagreement were normal and insignificant. They had the type of relationship most people want. They were open and honest in their relationship. No relationship problems were ever mentioned by Chris to Josh. Chris recently started working out more and eating healthier. Chris told Josh that Shanann talked to him about his changed eating habits. Josh assured Chris that Cassie talked to him about that when he changed his diet too. He thought that it was within the last month that Chris started changing his diet. He was eating less carbs and eating cleaner. Josh estimated that maybe around May 2018, Chris started working out and running more. He and Chris would trade running times to encourage one another. Josh noted in San Diego in June that Chris was working out harder and there were changes in Chris's physique from it. Josh did not know about any supplements that Chris took, but he knew he used Thrive and said, in quotes, "We all do." Josh does not know about the finances of Chris and Shanann. Josh never asked Chris, and Chris never divulged anything about his finances. Josh thought it felt like they were a normal family on a normal budget. I asked what Josh knew about Chris's job. Chris worked in the oil field. He monitored and inspected systems pertaining to the oil fields. He believed Chris worked out in the field and did not get the impression that he was in an office. Chris had a work truck that he drove from location to location. Chris did not mention having friends at work. Josh last talked to Chris by phone on August 13th. Chris called Josh and told him that he did not know what to do about Shanann and the kids being missing. He told Josh he was lost. Josh encouraged that all anyone could do was make phone calls and try to figure out what happened. Chris said he felt uneasy. Josh told Chris, in quotes, "You know how this looks," end quote, alluding to the belief that something had gone wrong involving them. Chris acknowledged that and told Josh that he did not know what to do. He said he felt like everyone was mad at him and he did not know who to call. Chris said he did not know how anyone could think he could do it. Josh told Chris that he needed to do everything he could. This phone call from Chris felt, in quotes, different to Josh than a call from the Chris he knew. Josh felt it was like Chris was looking for information, which was not like him. It did not feel like Chris and did not seem like Chris wanted Josh to do anything for him, but more like Chris was trying to find out how Cassie and the friends of Shanann felt. Chris did not seem genuine to Josh. Chris told Josh that he just talked to Nicole, Shanann's friend, and said that Shanann had gone to a friend's house. He said that he saw Nicole on the doorbell camera at his house. Josh texted Chris on August 14th to ask for updates. Chris replied that police were getting the missing person report ready. Josh knew from Cassie and Shanann that there were changes in Chris over the 4 to 5 weeks prior to Shanann's Arizona trip. There was discussion about divorcing or separating. When Chris was in North Carolina with Shanann and the kids, Shanann had said he was cold, inattentive, and did not show love. It was not the Chris they knew. I asked about Josh knowing of discussion about separation divorce between Chris and Shanann. He said that Cassie often FaceTimed him while at the conference, and he often saw the group of girls and chatted with them. On Saturday night, August 11th, Shanann learned of a charge that she was concerned about, given that Chris was supposedly at a Rockies game with friends from work. Shanann was visibly upset and crying when discussing this in Arizona. Shanann said she did not understand what had changed. She said that she loved Chris and did not know why he did not love her. Shanann said that Chris wanted to separate and move on, saying he could not do this anymore. The group, to include Josh, talked to Shanann about her strength and assured her it would not be the end, as she had the kids and a baby on the way. Shanann expressed that she wanted to be strong for her kids and show them that you can get through life, and was positive about it. Shanann wanted to at least try counseling for her kids' sake, even if it did not work between her and Chris. Josh and Chris had texted about the new baby. Chris seemed excited through the text. Josh said that he immediately knew something had gone wrong with Shanann and the girls due to the state of the house and his knowledge of Shanann. He knew there was zero chance that Shanann would have left the house like it was and without her phone and medications for the kids. Josh was aware of an argument in North Carolina that Shanann had with Chris's parents about a kid allergy. He is certain she would have never left the house without those meds. He said those kids were Shanann's everything, and she would have never done anything to jeopardize her kids. I asked Josh if he has seen anything about Chris's statement to law enforcement. Josh heard that Chris claimed Shanann killed the kids. Josh told me that Chris, he knew, would not have done any of this to begin with. The eyes Josh sees on Chris on TV are not the same. They lack sincerity and soul. Josh thinks that someone gave this scenario to Chris as his only shot to possibly avoid a death penalty. Josh suggested Chris is trying to figure out this lie he has created. Josh said that there is no possible scenario for Chris's statement to be accurate, even if he had told Shanann he wanted a divorce and was cheating on her. Josh insisted that Shanann would have never done anything to her kids. She would choose her kids over Chris 100 times out of 100, if she would have had to. Josh thinks Chris is saying this in an effort to figure out how to cope with what he did. I asked Josh if there was any indication that Chris may have been cheating on Shanann. Josh said that he does not believe that Chris would have had an affair on Shanann. He believes that anyone can change their mind on things at any point, and such is simply human nature. He thinks that Chris possibly changed his mind and decided against a relationship with Shanann, but would have told Shanann before seeking out another woman. Josh still feels this way about Chris. Josh told me that he feels like there are two Chris's, the Chris he knew and the Chris he now sees in the media. I asked Josh if he thinks there is anyone else who could have done this. There is no one else who could have done this in Josh's opinion. Josh shared a scenario that he thinks could have happened. Shanann came home. Shanann and Chris talked. Chris told her he was done. Shanann got emotional and cried. Chris tried to leave. Shanann tried to stop him. An accident happened and then spiraled out of control. There was a commotion that woke the kids. Chris was someone else at this point. Chris had to eliminate the kids as they were witnesses. Josh said that this is the only logical scenario, as there was no possible way Shanann could have laid a hand on the kids. Shanann lived and worked to make her family's life better as a whole. Shanann had said that if he wants to leave, that was fine. She did not want to give up and would try counseling. It was just not logical for Josh to believe that Shanann could have done anything to hurt her children, as Chris stated. I asked Josh if he had considered that Chris planned anything like this. Josh said that Chris is a very smart guy, and if he had planned it out, he would not have gotten caught. I asked if it was possible that Chris had not considered that Shanann's friends would have been actively looking for her Monday morning. Josh felt like Chris would have planned for that had he considered, thought about, or planned for more than 2 hours before he did it. Josh feels Chris did not plan it and that it was in the heat of the moment. Chris knew his truck had GPS in it, and he told Josh about it and did not use it for personal things. Chris knew that Shanann was attached to her phone and that she is the type who responds immediately to texts. I asked about Josh's knowledge of Chris's mental health. Josh had no concerns. He did not know Chris to see counselors or take medicine for mental health matters. Josh described Chris as pretty calm and level-headed. He was not the type to get angry or upset. He was frustrated by normal things such as the gym being too crowded, as it was in San Diego. It was nothing out of the ordinary to Josh. I asked about the trip to Colorado in May in which Josh and his family stayed with the Watts. They arrived on a Monday morning and Chris was already at work. They hung out with Shanann and the kids. Chris got home maybe around 3 or 4 p.m. He parked along the street and the truck stayed there. His work truck is a pickup, maroon or brown in color. There was stuff in the back. Chris never parked the truck in the driveway when Josh was there. Josh did not see Chris come from or go to the truck for work or over the weekend. Josh was inside each time. I asked about Shanann's mental health. Josh described her as being a normal woman emotionally. She was loving, open, good, kind, transparent, a giver, a great host, passionate, even keel, extraordinary, loved to make people happy, would not get mad, tried to work problems out, not over-exaggerated, no drama. Josh thought Shanann took medication for lupus and fibromyalgia. I just want to stop there for a second. I think that's one of the best descriptions that I've read of anyone regarding Shanann. So I want to read it one more time. She was loving, open, good, kind, transparent, a giver, a great host, passionate, even keel, extraordinary, loved to make people happy, would not get mad, tried to work problems out, not over-exaggerated, no drama. Josh knew that Shanann had been in a bad relationship with an ex-husband in the past. Things stuck with her and shaped her into being the loving person she was. Josh wanted to reiterate that those close to Chris and Shanann, as he and Cassie were, and knew who Chris and Shanann were, know that Shanann would not have left her things at the house the way it was, or ever put a hand on her kids, even in her worst moment. She was kind, loving, open, and even going through the pain of starting over without Chris, she was still focused on being a better example for her kids. He does not know how anyone could see it otherwise. Josh believes that Chris killed the kids too. He thinks something went wrong and spiraled out of control, and he was now lying because he cannot deal with what he did. Cassie came to the phone to provide that she and Josh are moving to Colorado next week and provided their new address. Cassie also wanted to make sure investigators know there was an Amazon Alexa in the Watts' house that may have recorded something to aid in the investigation. I assured her that was known and thanked her and encouraged her to reach out with other thoughts or information that comes to her. Josh forwarded screenshots of his texts with Chris for this investigation. This is the review of those texts. On May 29th at 3:42 p.m., Josh texts Chris that an application was it. He then congratulated Chris for something. Chris replied, "Thanks, man." He said that he has to make sure he does not do too much and lift anything. They then discussed the application process and how long it takes. June 17th at 7:23 a.m. Chris wishes Josh a happy Father's Day, and Josh replies the same. June 22nd and 23rd. It appears that Josh and Chris are in a hotel with Shanann and Cassie and are chatting about planning and getting food. June 23rd, 7:50 a.m. Chris says that Shanann will divorce him if he gets food without her, and he would end up like the homeless guy yelling at himself on the street. June 24th, they chat about the weather and the heat. July 6th, they joke about Josh applying for a job. July 6th at 6:48 a.m. Josh asked Chris how the bachelor life was. Chris replied in 1 minute that he was working out a lot, picking up weekend shifts. He said it was going by fast so far. And then you have the actual texts here, which I won't read. It's on page 706 and 707. July 6th at 6:50 a.m. Josh asks if it feels weird being in the house alone. Later that morning at 7:16, Chris replies that he was trying to eat a little cleaner with no kids around. He said in quotes, "It's a little weird, but I've been keeping busy." August 8th at 7:52 a.m., Josh asked Chris if he was excited about the ultrasound. Same day, 9:12 a.m. Chris replied that today was the day, 7 p.m., and that he was excited. Chris said he was secretly hoping it is a boy. Chris replied in quotes, "LOL, yeah, me too." August 8th, 11:44 a.m. Chris texted about eating cleaner and Shanann giving him the third degree for him refusing to eat a few things. He said he can see his abs again and is working hard to get cut. He said that combining Thrive and eating lean meats is making a big difference. Chris texted that he had come to realize that abs are made in the kitchen. And then August 8th at 8 p.m., Josh texts about waiting patiently. Chris tells him that the envelope is sealed until next weekend. Josh asks if they are going to do a reveal. Chris replies, "Yes, sir." August 10th, 6:51 a.m., Josh texted to congratulate Chris. "Congrats, buddy. Little man is a lucky boy." Chris replied, "Thanks, man." August 11th at 9 p.m., Josh texts Chris asking if he is still awake. Chris immediately replies that he is headed home from a Rockies game. Josh asks him to let him know when he is not driving because he has a question. August 12th at 7 a.m. Chris replied, "What's up, bro? Sorry, I passed out once I got home." Josh replied to ask to make sure Chris was okay with his family being at his house, if need be. Chris replied that it was cool. Chris asked when Josh thought his family would be moving to Colorado for a job Josh took with True Value. Josh estimated 1 month. Chris texted that the Rockies game was crazy and gave some scoring info. Josh said he saw on ESPN and had only been to 2 moments like that. Chris replied, in quotes, "It was epic." Then on Monday, August 13th at 11:16 a.m., Josh texted to ask Chris if he had heard from Shanann today because Cassie and Nikki could not get a hold of her. Chris replied that he had just talked to Nikki. Chris texted that Shanann went to a friend's house with the kids and he had not heard from her since, but would keep him updated. Now Tuesday, August 14th at 5:59 a.m., Josh texted for any work and asked Chris how he was doing. Chris replied that there was no word at all. The cops were getting the missing person report ready. Chris said he was at home, sick to his stomach. So it says, "I just talked to Nikki. Shanann went to a friend's house with the kids today. I haven't heard from her since. I will keep you updated, though." Josh, "Okay, the girls are worried." Chris, "I know. I just saw Nikki on the doorbell camera." Josh, "Any word? How are you doing?" Chris, "No word at all, man. I know the cops are getting the missing person report ready. I'm at home, sick to my stomach." Josh, "No luck on calls or hospitals or hotels and things? Let me know if you need any help." Chris, "Hospitals had nothing. Every hotel I could think of, man. Thanks, man. I appreciate it." Attachments, 23 screenshots of text communication between Josh and Chris. So that's where we're going to end part 32, finishing on page 711. And just a couple things here. I think, again, with the interview with Josh, we hear a lot of the similar story that the friends have been circulating and discussing. They were all so in the know, even the spouses, which is pretty incredible. So we continue to see the strength of the group of friends and even their spouses. And their descriptions of Shanann, her personality, especially as a mother, really led the law enforcement in the right direction very quickly. And Josh was very strong in his convictions. Even Josh regarding Chris being the only suspect at all, and even saying he thought he killed the kids. That was pretty incredible. But going to the Mistress's interview, I think, we've read a lot of interviews from family members, from friends. They're very consistent in their stories. Their stories make sense, and they're fluid. And there's two main people whose interviews don't seem that way, and that's Chris and that's the Mistress. And, the Mistress's interviews tend to contain significant contradictions, just like Chris's did, between what she says and what she does. So, certainly we continue to see that we would hope more questions would be asked of her, because her story just doesn't seem to make sense fully and line up. But you see all these friends and family members that even the workers at the school and the doctors, their stories are just very consistent and fluid, and Chris's and the Mistress's are not. So, something to think about. In loving memory of Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico, God, we ask that you bless the Rusek family. We ask that you guide them in your light, strengthen them with your hand, and protect them as their shield. This is The Diplomat. Have a great day.